Well, good morning, everyone. I hope this message finds you doing well and that you've had a good week and that you're still navigating your sanity in the midst of all the chaos. I'm feeling better this week. I got over my strep throat and my COVID test came back negative, so that was good. And I'm glad to be able to visit with you this morning. We're going to talk a little bit more. We're still in Matthew, and I'm going to talk to you about one of the parables that Jesus used in talking with the religious elite of the day. And this parable is kind of really weird, and there have been a lot of different interpretations of it. And I don't think that anyone can claim, although people do, claim to have the absolute, this is what this means, but I'm going to share a few thoughts with you this morning about it. Now, things were ramping up between Jesus and the religious elite of the day. And we must be careful anytime we are talking about New Testament scriptures that we don't in any way justify anti-Semitism, because that's not what the original intenders, they wouldn't have even understood what we would be talking about. I mean, Jesus was a Palestinian Jew. But what he was addressing was the injustices of the day. And so he's using this parable to get at that with these religious leaders. And they're furious with him. They can't figure out where he's getting his authority, because they're the authority and the power in this particular religious community. And they don't understand where he's getting the authority that he's getting. And so it keeps just ramping up, and we know that eventually he gets arrested and he gets killed for this. And so we're kind of moving in to that area in time now. But he talks about, and I've mentioned to you before, that the parable is something that is given to go alongside a message that he's trying to get, a point that he's trying to get across. So he uses a story, something that they would have understood, and that it would sort of get them in their hearts and in their heads in a way that just pure words wouldn't. So he says that this parable is compared to the kingdom of heaven. Remember, Jesus is always talking about, pay attention, because this realm of God, this vision of this beloved community is right here, right now. We're supposed to be participating in it now. So he says the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king, giving a feast in honor of his son. Now, that would have been common for that day for kings and for elite people to give banquets for their sons. And so one of the things that they would do is they would send their servants out to go bear the invitations to the right people, the elite people that would want to be invited, because if you invited the elite people to your banquet, then that made you look more honorable. And remember, everything was about your position in the community. So this king sent his servants out and said, invite all the right people, the people that are on this invitation list, and tell them that I've prepared everything, because that was also very important. Guests needed to know that the host had gone to the proper trouble. And so the servants go out with this message, and the invitees, the really cool people, said, no, not interested. And they had varying excuses, but their attitude overall was just, no, we're not coming. So the king reacted rather than responded. Anytime you use acts of violence, that's a reaction, not a response. So he sent his people in, his men in, to go burn the place down, so to speak. And after that, he said, well, okay, I'll go out to the streets and get just by anybody you see, invite them, the nobodies. Get all the nobodies to come to the banquet. So the servants went out, and it was common for the peasants to gather in the streets to talk with each other and get the news of the day. And so you can see them being kind of surprised that someone would invite them in. But they went to the banquet. Now, one of the customs at that time was that the host would prepare the robes or the things that you would have to wear to the banquet when you got there. So you were provided with something. So he looks around and he's, probably patting himself on the back that he showed those insiders and had his banquet anyway. And then he sees this one guy who doesn't have the proper dress on. And so it says that he goes, "Hey friend, how did you get in here without the proper attire?" But that friend is kind of like if you said, it was really demeaning. It was like, "Well, hey buddy," or "Hey boy," it was a derogatory statement. And then the guy didn't say anything, and so they threw him out. It's a bizarre parable, but a lot of people have interpreted it that the king is God, and that that the people that are invited into the banquet and accept the invitation, that those are the good guys, and that the guy that gets thrown out is a guy that's not righteous. And I'm sure that is one way of looking at it. And I can see sort of, but I really can't see that interpretation at all, because if you see God as that king, then it's very easy to justify violence. It's very easy to justify this imperial attitude, or condoning that if I get hit, then I'm going to hit harder. And it doesn't line up with the gospel of Jesus the Christ. It doesn't line up with the good news of loving God and loving your neighbor and forgiving your enemy. So I can't see that the king is God. And it could be that the king represents just that, empire. Empire building its kingdom. And this would have infuriated the religious elites, because remember, they were compromising and trying to work with the powers of the Roman Empire in order to be able to continue business as usual. So if you think of God as that kind of king that would strike people down for refusing an invitation, then you could start a war. You could condone the colonialization of nations. You could do a lot of violence and justify it with that kind of interpretation. But what if the king is just that, the empire? And what if the person that gets thrown out for not having the proper attire is really not a fool or a bad person at all, or an unrighteous person, but maybe the Christ figure in this parable? You see, Christ didn't buy into the compromise of the day. Christ maintained his integrity. He maintained his message. He maintained his love, even though he was thrown out, cast out, abused, persecuted, crucified. He maintained this message of love in the face of empire. I think that is the message of life that can come from this parable. And it also would have infuriated and did the powers that be of the day. So I guess our question from that and how we can relate to that today is, are we remaining true to the integrity of this message of love in the face of all of the empire of hate today? I think that hatred is more unleashed today and visible than I've ever seen it. I mean, hatred is always there, but there's been kind of this veneer. But right now, it's just spewing everywhere. And so what I'm thinking about is, where are those areas that I am participating in that? Because I can get really angry at some of the stuff that I hear. And so this is a very convicting message for me. Am I taking on the attitude of hatred? Or am I going to maintain a position of love in the face of hate? Well, there's your something to chew on today. God bless you, and go in peace.